Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're tackling a topic a lot of you have been asking about, the connection between autism and something called little t trauma.
Oh, definitely.
And I have a feeling this is going to hit home for a lot of our listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the material you sent over is so diverse. Articles, blog posts, even personal stories. It
Yeah.
seems like people are really struggling with this.
Yeah, for sure. And, our listeners are already pretty knowledgeable about autism,
Yeah.
but this little t trauma thing might be a new perspective for them. It's all about those like everyday things, the ones that just kind of wear you down over time,
Okay.
especially for neurodivergent folks.
It's so true. It's not about those big dramatic events that we usually think of as trauma.
Right.
Little trauma is more like a constant stream of smaller stressors that just build up and up.
I get it.
Imagine feeling out of place in social situations all the time,
Hmm.
or being bombarded by sensory input that other people don't even notice.
Like being told you're too sensitive when a certain sound or texture like literally makes you want to crawl out of your skin.
Exactly. And it's these kinds of experiences happening over and over again that can really add up to little trauma.
Okay, so why are autistic individuals particularly vulnerable to this kind of cumulative stress?
I'm guessing our sources pointed to a few key factors, right?
They do. And this is where those aha moments might come in, even for those of you who've been living with this for a while.
Right.
Like the constant effort of navigating social situations that are built on all these unwritten rules and neurotypical expectations.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape.
Exactly. Then you add in sensory processing differences.
Oh, yeah.
Something as simple as fluorescent lights or a scratchy tag on a shirt can feel unbearable to some artistic people.
Right.
These things might seem small, but they're constant sources of stress that a lot of people don't even realize exist.
One of the blog posts you sent me described grocery shopping as feeling like being trapped in a pinball machine. Wow.
That image really stuck with me.
It's so vivid, right? It shows how what might seem minor to one person can be a major stressor to another.
For sure.
And speaking of things that seem minor,
Yeah.
our sources also talk about the impact of changes in routine and transitions, even small ones.
Yeah.
For many autistic individuals, routine provides a sense of safety and stability in a world that can feel chaotic.
So even something like a last-minute change of plans could be really unsettling.
Absolutely. And it's not about being stubborn or inflexible. It's about having a genuine need for predictability, which, let's be honest, we all crave to some extent.
So true.
Oh,
And finally, communication challenges were highlighted as a major contributor to little trauma. This one feels particularly heartbreaking to me.
it really is. Imagine the frustration of not being able to articulate your needs or constantly feeling misunderstood. That feeling of isolation, of not being heard, can be incredibly damaging over time.
It's like being stranded in a foreign country and not speaking the language. Every interaction becomes a potential source of stress. Now, before we move on, I want to ask you, our listener, does any of this resonate with your own experiences?
Hmm.
Have you stopped to consider how those seemingly small things might actually be having a larger impact than you realize? Take a moment and really think about that. Because once you start to recognize the effects of little trauma, you can begin to develop strategies for coping with it.
And that's what we'll explore next, those concrete strategies from your sources that can make a real difference. Now, when it comes to coping strategies, your sources had some fantastic advice. What really stood out to me was the emphasis on self-awareness.
Yeah,
Understanding your own individual triggers is key.
that makes sense. It's hard to navigate a storm if you don't know what sets it off.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But how do we actually identify those triggers?
Right.
That's where mindfulness comes in. It's about paying attention to those moments when you feel that surge of stress or anxiety.
Right.
What was happening just before? Were there any particular sounds, textures, social interactions that might have triggered that feeling?
So it's like becoming a detective of your own inner world.
Precisely. And once you start to recognize those patterns, you can begin to develop coping mechanisms.
Okay.
Maybe it's having noise-canceling headphones on hand.
Right.
Or a calming sensory toy you can fidget with when things start to feel overwhelming.
I love the idea of having a toolbox of strategies ready to go.
Right.
One source mentioned something called a sensory diet. What is that?
Oh, that's a great one. Think of it like a personalized menu of sensory experiences that help you stay regulated throughout the day.
Okay.
Maybe it's starting your morning with a calming cup of tea and some gentle stretches.
Mm-hmm.
Or taking a break in a quiet, dimly lit room when things get too intense.
It's like proactively designing your environment to minimize those little traumas.
Exactly. And beyond sensory regulation, several sources highlighted the power of social skills training. Now, I know this might sound a bit daunting, but hear me out.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's not about forcing yourself to be neurotypical. It's about learning specific tools and techniques to navigate social situations more effectively.
Okay.
Things like understanding body language, recognizing social cues, and even scripting conversations ahead of time.
So like learning a new language, the language of social interaction.
That's a great analogy. And it's a skill that can significantly reduce anxiety and misunderstandings, which ultimately leads to less little dick trauma.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Now we can't talk about coping without mentioning therapy.
Absolutely. Therapy can be such a valuable resource for processing the emotional impact of little trauma.
Right.
Having that safe space to explore your experiences and develop coping strategies with a trained professional can be incredibly powerful.
And one source specifically recommended seeking out therapists who are experienced in working with autistic individuals.
Yes. It's crucial to find someone who understands the unique challenges of navigating the world as an autistic person, someone who can validate your experiences and help you build a sense of empowerment.
Now, while individual coping mechanisms are crucial, our sources also pointed to something bigger at play here: the role of systemic factors in creating or exacerbating little trauma.
That's right. And this is where things get really interesting. Think about it. A lot of the stressors autistic people face are rooted in societal structures and attitudes.
So we're talking about things like a lack of understanding and acceptance of neurodiversity, inflexible work environments, inaccessible public spaces, and educational systems that aren't designed to accommodate different learning styles.
You got it. And that raises a vital question.
Yeah.
How do we create a world that minimizes these everyday stressors for autistic individuals? A world that is truly inclusive and understanding?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Well, one source I found particularly insightful talked about the concept of double empathy.
I remember seeing that term. What exactly does it mean?
It's the idea that communication breakdowns often happen not because autistic individuals lack empathy, but because autistic and non-autistic people experience and express empathy in different ways. There's a fundamental mismatch in understanding. Think back to those social situations we discussed earlier. The constant feeling of being out of sync, of not quite getting it.
So it's not just about autistic individuals learning to fit into the neurotypical world.
Exactly. It's about both sides bridging that empathy gap.
Right.
Non-autistic people need to work on understanding and appreciating different ways of communicating and experiencing the world.
Yeah.
We need to meet each other halfway.
That's such a powerful reframing of the issue. It takes the pressure off autistic individuals to constantly adapt and put some of the responsibility on neurotypical folks to step up their empathy game.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true communication is a two-way street, a collaborative dance, if you will.
I love that. It takes two to tango, as they say.
Yeah.
And speaking of collaboration, our sources also highlighted the vital role of allies in supporting autistic individuals.
Absolutely. Allies can make a huge difference. They can advocate for inclusive policies, educate others about neurodiversity, and create safe spaces where autistic individuals can be themselves without fear of judgment.
It's about showing up, speaking out, and being a voice for those who are often unheard or misunderstood.
Beautifully said. Now, beyond allyship, several sources discuss the importance of finding your tribe, your community of people who just get you.
Ah, yes, the power of belonging.
Exactly. Whether it's a local support group, an online forum, or just a handful of close friends and family members, having that strong support system can be a lifeline for autistic individuals, especially those who have experienced little trauma. It's about having that safe space where you can be yourself, where you can share your struggles and celebrate your triumphs.
It's about feeling seen, heard, and understood. That sense of belonging can be incredibly healing.
It really can. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to emphasize that healing from little trauma is often an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
It's not about reaching some magical destination where you're suddenly free from all stress and anxiety.
I get it.
It's about learning to manage those challenges, building resilience, and continuing to grow.
It's about acknowledging those setbacks as a normal part of the process and celebrating every step forward, no matter how small. And knowing you are not alone.
That's right. There are countless others who understand what you're going through and are here to support you. And speaking of support, let's shift gears and talk about something that's often overlooked: the concept of autistic joy.
Oh, I love this. It's so easy to get caught up in the challenges, but remembering the joys, the things that bring genuine excitement and passion, is so important.
It is. And this isn't just about individual happiness. It's about celebrating the unique strengths and perspectives that autistic individuals bring to the world. It's about shifting the narrative from deficit to difference, from focusing on what's wrong to appreciating the unique beauty and diversity of the human experience.
It's about recognizing those neurodivergent traits, not as something to be fixed, but as valuable assets that enrich our world. One of the blog posts you sent talked about the autistic individual's ability to hyper-focus on their passions.
Oh, absolutely. That intense focus can lead to incredible innovation and creativity. Think about all the groundbreaking discoveries and artistic masterpieces that have come from individuals who think and experience the world differently.
It's about recognizing those neurodivergent traits, not as something to be fixed, but as valuable assets that enrich our world. Yeah, it's like we're expanding what normal even means,
Yeah.
embracing all the amazing ways people can be. Speaking of embracing differences, one of the sources talked about the importance of self-advocacy.
Oh, it's so important. Learning to advocate for your needs and boundaries is key, especially in a world that isn't always designed with neurodiversity in mind.
Right, so this could involve anything from requesting accommodations at work to letting friends know about your sensory sensitivities.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's as simple as saying no to situations that feel overwhelming. It's about owning your needs and creating a life that truly works for you.
It's about empowerment. And speaking of empowering, I think this is a good place to loop back to that idea of autistic burnout that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Could this be linked to the constant stress of navigating a world that isn't always accommodating?
That's such an insightful connection. Imagine those daily struggles, those microaggressions adding up over time.
Yeah.
It's no wonder that autistic individuals might reach a point of exhaustion and depletion.
So autistic burnout could be seen as a consequence of prolonged exposure to little Mayan trauma. That's definitely something to think about.
It is, and it highlights the urgent need for greater awareness and understanding of these issues.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm struck by the incredible resilience of the autistic community. To navigate a world that's often confusing, overwhelming, and even hostile takes so much strength.
It really does, and yet, despite those challenges, autistic individuals continue to shine, to innovate, to create, and to make the world a richer and more beautiful place.
Their stories are a powerful reminder that neurodiversity is not a deficit but a gift.
Absolutely. And by embracing our differences and working together to create a more inclusive and accepting world, we can truly unlock the full potential of every human being.
Beautifully said. I'm so grateful for all the insights you've shared today. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too.
The pleasure was all mine. It's been a truly enriching conversation.
And to our listeners, thank you for diving into this important topic with us. Remember, this is just the beginning. There's a whole world of information and resources out there waiting to be explored.
Keep learning, keep connecting, and keep advocating for a world that celebrates the unique beauty of neurodiversity.
And on that note, we'll leave you to your own deep dives. Thanks for joining us.